traditional TV because of the things we talked about earlier about it being annoying and interruptive. And it's moving into platforms like mobile, which are much more addressable, targetable, location-based. You can react to an ad and take a actual action against it. So as budgets come out, traditional budgets come out of the 60, in the US alone, advertising on TV is a $62 billion business. Money is running out of TV into mobile. The first beneficiaries of that are companies like Facebook and Twitter that have very targeted advertising capabilities and know who the user is. But the engagement that happens in a game with a consumer who sees a video, chooses to see a video ad of their own accord, the numbers are so much higher in terms of what advertisers care about. Purchase intent, favorability, likability, likelihood to share it with their friends, that the money's going to continue from brands to flow into platforms like games that have a better widget for video advertising. And eventually you're going to crowd out a lot of this CPC, CPI, CPA advertising with brand video dollars. And we're already starting to do upfront deals now in New York on Madison Avenue that looks at our video inventory on a full year basis. So you lose some of the seasonality that you see with the run up into the holidays, and brands trying to figure out, how do I get this young, engaged, mobile consumer on a consistent basis with an engaging experience they actually want. And so I think that, to some extent, the heavy nature of app advertising in games right now will start to be mediated over the next couple years, certainly as more and more dollars flow in, and platforms like Blue, like Shazam, like Sega, like EA have engaged users that love the experience, that are in there and respond really well to the advertising. It's inevitable. It's happened in all the other major media forms. Mobile's just a better platform because of the interactivity and the ability for a user to take an action on that ad and for the ad to be very targeted.
Let's talk a bit more. I think rewarded video, which you've mentioned a couple of times, I think it's definitely one of the sexier units based on the fact players actually ask for it, right? And you've talked about that, Dave, also. If we talk about rewarded video, what I'd love to know is, I'm seeing more and more people adopt that actually. If you start to look at the top grossing, I think the top grossing games, even a year ago, you saw very few of advertising. Now, you don't see necessarily as much as the traditional display advertising, but you're starting to see a lot more rewarded video. So, and I think, Christian, you've done a ton of this at Glue. So, in regards to rewarded video, I'd love to know how do you feel about it in general for your, I know you love it, you can elaborate, but also, what are the kind of rewards that you're finding is really working for players so they actually engage with it?
Yeah. So I'd like to start off just really quick by just addressing speaking in the first person to answer a lot of these. I personally, or just fundamentally, I always try to remove myself from the picture, and I try desperately to not optimize for Christian Limon and to optimize for the power user, and that I might not be the power user and have no clue who the power user is, but the power user is out there in the millions and can be measured by measuring retention and ARPU and ARPU. So I try to be completely neutral and agnostic and just frankly not care about, have any preference about what wins or how I feel about it personally, or whether I made a guess previous to the results coming in. But on the rewarded video, back to that question. Yeah, Glue's been a long-time partner with rewarded video networks. We see great results. It's very frequently a meaningful piece of our business. Yeah. We even have started to instead of having it be a double opt-in where you seek out the earn free button and then choose to watch videos, or even had begun testing something that we at Glue call CVAs, contextual video ads, where you reward the user with some kind of consumable in between levels so that they can continue to keep playing for watching the video. And that has been very successful. We haven't seen, even though it will never cease to come up, because it's very easy to come up with objections, right? But it's very difficult to think clearly about and about what it would take to measure and address a problem, because there'll always be a reason not to add advertising. Somebody will always come up with oh, you're going to cannibalize this, or it's too often here, or you're going to mess with retention, and because our users, they don't monetize until whatever level, but all those are incredibly subjective statements. And as long as you're optimizing for retention and ARPU and ARPU, then I don't see that it's cannibalistic. It's completely additive and adds to top line revenue.
Ashley, Sega currently, are you guys doing rewarded video in any of your games?
Yeah, so probably about a third of our ad inventory is rewarded if you sort of blend it across all of our titles. I think on a title-by-title basis, we sort of determine what the ad mix is going to be. For a more mid or hardcore game, we'll do maybe only rewarded video, because we're sort of counting on IAP to do the majority of the monetization. Whereas with a more casual game, we obviously skew a little heavier on the ad side. We try to push as many views toward the rewarded side as possible because it's user opt-in, players like it, and basically, as much as we can try to integrate the ad experience into the core game loop, we'll do that, basically so the user is getting a positive experience out of the ad engagement. So maybe the player in a puzzle type game was just about to beat the level, they were short one shot, we'll give them an opportunity to watch a video to get one extra shot. So they're sort of excited about this chance to get there, to complete the level. The same with, we have an endless runner, Sonic Dash, that we have a sort of placement at the end where if they, maybe did something silly and wiped out at a bad place, then they can sort of pick up where they left off by watching a video, things like that. And we find the performance is really good. We never force the views, so if they sort of start watching and want to X out in the middle, they can, but we find the completion rates are really high, and so then the sort of click-through and engagement rates after that are really high as well.
So the two common questions I get with rewarded video is, one, will it cannibalize my payers, my in-app purchases? And two, is there any other benefit to the game metrics? Does it drive engagement, retention? Do any of you guys have any thoughts or experience with that?
I mean, I think the data, this is pretty industry-wide, so Ben, we've talked about it. I think Ashley, you mentioned it, and I surveyed a lot of people in the industry. And our own data shows, without a doubt, just like free sampling in the supermarket. When you go in the supermarket and someone's sampling chocolate chip cookies, some percent of the people who sample the chocolate chip cookies end up buying the chocolate chip cookies in the supermarket. It didn't cannibalize the sale of orange juice while they were there. It just meant more people bought that brand of chocolate chip cookie that they were sampling. It's essentially free sampling. The data is undeniable that it adds to retention. So people who get rewarded, who get free stuff, free samples, come back more often. They are more engaged when they come back, and they actually end up spending more money than the people who didn't get the free samples. And we do this across not just mobile, but other platforms as well. So we're now doing this, actively rewarding, giving users the control to choose to engage to be rewarded across console games as well. And the numbers are consistently strong. People love the opportunity for free samples, and they feel good about it. And that data is, it seems to be industry-wide. I would argue that all this talk of native advertising is really annoying, because most of it is when I'm in my Yahoo finance feed, I can't tell the difference between a news story and an ad, because they've disguised the ad and they call that native advertising. No, it's just disguised annoying it's advertorial, right? It used to be called an advertorial. It's disguising an ad to make you believe it's not an ad. Then when you click on it, you realize, oh shit, that was an ad. Oh shoot, that was an ad. In
we
gaming,
can edit, Dave. We can edit.
Thank you. In gaming, the native ad is actually rewarding people with more game content. That is the ultimate in native advertising. It's such a wonderful platform that you're going to see this in essentially every digital media type out there. In fact, newspapers are starting to play with it. So right now, a lot of newspapers cut you off after 20 stories or something. Now they're trying to get rid of the paywalls by letting you watch an ad to get further into stories. Pandora and Spotify, both in the last month, announced that they're doing a sponsored session, which is essentially saying, hey, get an extra hour of subscription time commercial-free for watching an ad up front. Hulu, the video service, lets you watch a long-form commercial to have a half-hour show uninterrupted by ads. So that all these different media platforms are doing it. This is going to be the prevalent form of advertising in digital. It just takes a while for the battleship of Madison Avenue to turn and face in the right direction. And then you also have to take into account that in English-speaking countries, video advertising is more aggressively advanced in digital. So it's going to take even longer in the rest of the globe as video advertising takes time to pick up because there hasn't been huge TV markets there. But without a doubt, in fact, we're willing to forego ad revenue that's less user-friendly to have a user-friendly experience in EA games that is a longer-term view that's player-first, player-centric, and great for the player journey.
Thanks, Dave. So we're going to speed date some more of the answers, if that's okay with you guys, because I've got a laundry list of things I want to try and cover. But you've led me on to the next topic, which is buzzword of the year, native buzzword of the year, native advertising. So anybody that's had anything to do with advertising will know in 2014 they've mentioned it everywhere, including a very funny John Oliver skit. For those of you who haven't seen it, I would YouTube that. What I'd love to do is start. I think there's a million definitions of native, so I think a great place to start is maybe in a couple of sentences each, what you guys define as native advertising for you. Let's start with you, Christian, on this end and go down.
Sure. I guess most popular, it's either in newsfeed or in timeline type advertising, or some type of ad unit that's native and authentic to the experience, where it almost appears to be within gameplay, but really within the user experience, and where it's not truly an ad, so that it's not cannibalizing, or and it doesn't measurably impact the user in the exact same way that an advertisement might. So say if I have an interstitial and the frequency is every 15 minutes, I can measure whether something is an ad or not based on how it impacts either retention or monetization for those users. And if something is a native ad, whether it's a sponsorship or whether it's a opt-in video, then it often doesn't have any impact on the other KPIs related to advertising.
Right.
Yeah, I think that generally native is sort of where the ad matches the look and feel of the app, doesn't necessarily jar the user. I think in gaming, it's a little more challenging to make that work outside of, if we assume that rewarded video is as native as it gets. There may be some other examples on the fringe, but I think that probably with gaming, the opportunity for big sort of brand sponsorships or skins or things like that are probably a good opportunity for a native type experience within gameplay, but we certainly haven't done much with it so far.
Okay. Rhiannon?
Native is a big deal for us. We define it as anything that is very bespoke and unique to Shazam. We have several versions of native advertising or native units that we make available to partners only. We don't make any of the native units available via exchanges. You can only purchase them directly from us. And the best performing ones are, they're all very integrated into the app so that they look and feel part of the experience. The kind of in-feed type advertising, which is something that we're also experimenting with via Facebook and those types of demands, that's interesting to us, and we are seeing great results with it. We want to do more, but we basically see that as just another form of display. It's not native to us.
In one sentence, Dave.
So I guess you already emphatically said that I think native is a four-letter word of advertising. It's a way to sneak ads in on people. Generally speaking, although games offers a better way to do it, and that can be integrating a brand into a game. So if you're playing a game like Madden or NHL, Gatorade is integrated in the game, and the coach gets the Gatorade dunk on their head just like they would in a real NFL game. That's very native to the experience. But again, this notion of reward mechanism feels like the right way to define native. Sneaking an ad into your newsfeed and calling it native is, to me, it doesn't feel like a long-term trend.
The difficulty in native advertising has to do with to make it authentic and native pulls in one direction, and for it to scale pulls in the exact opposite direction. So if you want like a very complimentary, very authentic experience would be like if Kim Kardashian had a Coach purse and was sporting that in the game, and we got Coach to sponsor it. The difficulty would be in doing deals like that, or having sponsorships, or having advertisements that actually match the content with authenticity, but without a larger direct sales force or direct relationships with all the largest brands and a lot of foresight in beginning these discussions. It becomes very difficult to scale when you're at a 2 million plus or 6 million plus DAUs point.
Okay, let's move on to one of the topics I love to discuss is ad quality, particularly on the display side where you can potentially have billions of impressions. So, what do you guys do to protect your consumers and players from bad ads? That's to anyone, whoever feels like answering.
Yeah. I guess just diligence. Like the basics, the non-sexy stuff is like blacklists and seeing what ads are being run, direct relationships with the advertisers. I helped to build an ad network, so I kind of know what the levers are in the background, and the fact that you can have manual control, and that it should be the responsibility of the ad networks and the ad partners to provide a confident experience, and that you don't have ads sneak through that are not approved or that are not appreciated by the very hardworking people that made the game and thought it up. But with that said, mistakes can be made. But that's why it's really important to have a good relationship with your ad networks, to work with people that you trust, work with people that work really hard, so the moment there's any issue, it's being worked on and being solved for.
Yeah, same for us. I think there's a big emphasis when we onboard new partners to make sure that we're clear that a lot of our titles have very broad appeal. We want to make sure that we're appropriate basically for all age groups. And so working closely with the networks to make sure things are blacklisted and that we're all on the same page with sort of what's acceptable and what's not is definitely something that we focus on.
Great. I have another buzzword for you guys, programmatic. Are you guys doing anything with programmatic advertising today? And obviously I'm talking specifically to mobile, where it's obviously a bit newer. Are you working with programmatic partners today? Do you see that as an exciting future, or the death of everything?
It's a big world, and which means there's a lot of global opportunity. Programmatic, machine to machine, basically advertising, trading desks, if you will, along with upfront deals is I think it's a big growth area for a company like EA, where we have IP, intellectual property that a lot of brands want to engage consumers in. And so it's a growth area. It's one that's relatively new in the mobile space, but we see it becoming a meaningful part of the overall revenue trajectory. And again, because of the volume of people in games and the engagement they have, it's probably one of the meatiest areas for advertising agencies and trading desks and to sink their teeth into. So it's definitely a growth area for us.
Anybody else programmatic? Ashley?
We love programmatic. So far, we've worked, because we work with MoPub, and so we've had, basically, that's been our first foray into the programmatic exchange side of things, not RTB. But for us, especially having sort of the brand recognition around Sega, we've been able to sort of benefit from the free market dynamics of watching the sort of bids go up and over each other, where if you were on a blind network, you might not necessarily get the same sort of performance. And we sort of watched CPM skyrocket, and now more and more of our volume goes in that direction. And not for nothing, being able to put in one SDK and get access to hundreds of different ad sources is huge, just from a sort of app footprint perspective, and selling it through to teams internally.
It only makes sense that as programmatic and RTDs become more mature on mobile, that's going to be meaningful. So I glue on positioning our company toward a place in partnerships that can benefit from that whole range of activity, especially if fill is an issue for any games or for any apps once your app is at scale.
Okay, great. We've got about, our clock's upside down, so I'm trying to interpret that. I think it's just over 10 minutes. So I've got some more questions I'm going to ask the panelists, but if any of you guys have questions, there's a microphone there, so if you want to head over to the mic, and as I see you, we can just jump right in, why not? Let's do that, just sat right next to the mic. And then I'll fill in the empty, awkward silences with more questions on my end. Please.
I just have a question about what's the prevailing price on video ads in mobile, and what's the optimal length of these video ads?
It's a great question. Are you, to clarify, are you talking about just video in general, or the rewarded video that we've been discussing?
In that context, the games and
So some rewarded video.
30 seconds works really well. Usually has the strongest monetization opportunity. You can always test things out in the back end if you ever have any questions about whether something monetizes well or whether it scales, right? Because monetization is only interesting if it scales. But I run a UA group at Glue as well. So one of the first things I do is I'll run a test spend on our network and see what the quality is, if I can afford to bid it really high, because that will often determine how strong and the strength of monetization from that channel. And if I can spend a lot, and that means it scales, and that would be ultimately interesting to add in.
Anybody else want to elaborate? You don't have to, by the way. I'm just asking.
I think we generally do 30 seconds for rewarded. 15 is usually our max when we do sort of between level placements that are non-rewarded. In terms of performance,
Is that 15 non-skippable? When you say
no, so
between
between levels, the 15 seconds are always skippable, and then rewarded obviously it is also skippable, but we remind the user that they will sort of forfeit their reward if they skip out early. Performance-wise, I'll give sort of a cop-out answer that everyone gives, that it really depends on the game, also how the user base engages with the game, and probably most importantly, the geo makeup. So obviously, US, UK, Canada, Australia is sort of a premium inventory, and performance there can be pretty high. I guess probably over $20 CPMs in some cases. And then it sort of goes down from there depending on geo.
I'll weigh in a little bit here. I think taking the paradigm of TV and bringing it to mobile is probably not a great idea. So right now, most of the creative that comes over is often reformatted TV spots, and it's 30 seconds. 30 seconds is not an ideal time for someone on a mobile phone to have to watch an ad. I think it's probably somewhere below 10 seconds. 15 is probably okay right now, but some of the Vine stuff is pretty cool at 6 seconds. It's a short bite. These games are entertainment experiences on mobile devices are short bite. The ads can be short bite, and you can pack a lot of creative into a 5 or 10 or 15 second unit, and that's what creative people are doing. They're building stories that run over multiple units. And we're starting to see some pretty interesting creative that's well below 30 seconds happening in mobile advertising. And we think that trend will continue as creative directors at ad agencies start getting awards for creating short-form commercials like Vine ads that run on the Super Bowl. Then you see other creatives jump in, and you see more stuff happening in short bite windows. And that's good for us because we think the user would prefer a shorter experience. And that shorter experience then is conducive to the player experience and wanting to see more ads to be rewarded. So I think moving away from the TV paradigm of 30-second spots is probably good for mobile gaming and good for mobile content overall. It won't happen overnight, but the creativity and the innovation in advertising, because of things like Twitter and Snapchat and other instant messenger platforms, is going to lead to content being created that will end up running our games.
Great. Let's finish. What would be, and this is a question for everyone, what would be if I was a developer and I listened to this, I was like, great, I feel like I need to get into advertising. All I know is what these four guys on stage told me today. So I haven't been able to. What would be the best kind of almost going back to ABC of advertising? What would be the best advice or tips you could provide a developer wanting to monetize in this way? And anyone can go first.
Know your audience. Like the single most important thing in advertising is being able to explain who your audience is and what they're doing and why they're there, and paint that picture in as much detail as possible. It can be really hard on mobile, but that's the single most important thing I would say. Is know your audience backwards and be able to explain that.
I think for us, there were a lot of internal obstacles to overcome with putting in ads and games. So I think maybe particularly to the gaming audience, like giving advertising a shot and doing a lot of A/B testing to figure out what the true impact is of putting ads in the game, I think will be pretty eye-opening. And I think going along with that is challenging your own assumptions on what you think is going to happen. I think most people would say that they don't like advertising if you ask them, but people vote with their time. And I think in our case, we haven't seen negative impacts in sort of retention and monetization by using ads. So just kind of getting in there and trying things out can really open up a huge incremental revenue stream.
I would say one of the most helpful types of frameworks to keep in mind when it comes to advertising is to diligently fight the urge to like or dislike something. Try to ignore your subjective opinion and keep the conversation to things that are measurable. If I know we have a lot of real world analogies here, and it's very I would say often it's very easy to have a real world analogy that argues for or against something. But if you have a team that's confident in your approach in measuring and being disciplined about your measurement, and that you're all headed toward the same direction to maximize revenue in a way that makes it the best user experience, then I would definitely make sure to gain confidence of the entire team, whether it's 5 people or whether it's 600 people, and that you're making decisions that you're not winging and like or dislike, but that you're measuring and are benefiting the entire game.
Okay, take us home, Dave Madden. Super enlightening.
Thanks, Ben. That was a loaded ask there. So first of all, I think you're right. Taking emotion out of it and just looking at it, saying, does this make sense or not for my business, and who are my consumers? But at a very basic level, you have to pick what technology to put in your game. So there's a bunch of companies that are now focused on working with game developers to make it easier for you to put technology in your game to then turn on this magical flow of money that comes out of fairy dust in the sky into your game in the form of advertising. And there's some of the bigger companies, in the world like Google and Twitter and others that are doing that technology that makes it possible for you as a game developer to implement it. And then on a global basis, there might be other options as well. The only thing I would say, I guess I've been saying it the whole time, is be really sensitive to the user experience. You can't get users back who get frustrated and leave an entertainment experience you create. So if you put advertising in a way that enhances their experience, makes them feel good about playing your game and coming back and wanting more of your game in that experience, then it's a win for you. If you recreate the TV model and the radio model and annoy them and force them to go look somewhere else for a less abusive experience, then you create the exact opposite experience you want to have with advertising. So the model exists, it's happening, brands are buying into it, users love it, the data is undeniable. Gaming will end up being the single largest advertising platform in the world, because the number of devices that are in people's hands is going to far outweigh the number of TV sets that are out there. So in emerging markets, people will get their entertainment off a mobile device. Gaming is the #1 app being used on mobile devices, and with 98 to 100% in certain markets, the users not paying any money to play those apps, advertising will become the currency that enables an economy around making games for developers and for consumers. It may not happen overnight, but take my word, if we're sitting here 10 years from today, mobile advertising will be the single largest advertising platform in the world, bar none, in games.
It's a great way to end it. Thanks, Dave.